This is HighIntensityBusiness.com with Lawrence Neal, helping you achieve your health and fitness goals. Become a great personal trainer and build your high-intensity strength training business.
Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to HighIntensityBusiness.com. Today's guest is Luke Carlson. Luke is the founder and CEO of Discover Strength based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Discover Strength's 5 personal training facilities are among the highest volume and revenue training facilities in the country. Luke is a sought-after speaker to businesses and leaders in a variety of industries. Luke, welcome back to the show again.
Thank you very much for having me, Lawrence.
You're welcome. So this is the second part of a podcast called The Goose and the Golden Egg. We did the first part already, which will be published by this point, where we covered the first 4 steps of what it means to retain, to acquire, retain, and look after the goose, so to speak, which is the personal trainer. And so, if you're listening to this for the first time, I encourage you to press pause and actually go and listen to part 1, because then you'll understand the context a lot more to this one. So with this podcast, we're actually going to start at halfway through the presentation you gave, Luke, at Rec 2019. And so the first section is, how do we reward and recognize team? And the first point is TSP. Do you want to elaborate on kind of what that stands for and what that means?
Yeah, TSP stands for truth, specific, and positive. So essentially, when you're giving feedback to a trainer, when you are rewarding them or recognizing them, which is a foundational element of any manager's job responsibility, you want to do it with TSP. So you want to be truthful, which we're pretty good at. We're pretty good at being honest when we give feedback. You want to be specific. That's the one we really struggle with. And we want to be positive. And if you think about it, most sport coaches, for example, are pretty good at the truth and the positive. Like, I'm really proud of you kids. This is a little league baseball player. I'm really proud of you kids. So that's truthful and it's positive, but it's not very specific. So almost all of our feedback in the workplace, in athletics, and I would argue when we actually coach high intensity training, we lack specificity. So we want truth, specific, and positive. So when you're giving an employee feedback, you want to make sure that you're telling them exactly about what they did well. So I'll give you a quick example. I was in our Chanhassen location yesterday, and I was there with some new hires. So on the first day of someone's employment, they do a workout. So it's called day 1. They spend the whole day with me. They have lunch with our leadership team, and they work out with our leadership team. So we were doing a workout, and one of our trainers, Kelsey, was doing an introductory workout, a free introductory workout with a prospect. And I was eavesdropping and listening to Kelsey. And afterwards, I sent Kelsey a message later that evening via a Slack, and I just said, in specific detail, I said, Kelsey, you are so incredibly patient and such a great listener, and you made her feel so incredibly comfortable with your tone and your body language. I give tremendous specificity in why I thought she did a good job. I didn't just shoot her a message and say, hey, great job in that free introductory workout, because that's not enough. That's truthful and it's positive. But she needs to know what about it was great, because the reality is we're going to repeat whatever we get positive feedback on. So if you give someone feedback about something and you're really specific about it, that person, that employee, that team member will continue to do exactly that. So we want the specificity. And I think this applies to all the feedback we give anybody in a relationship. I literally don't care if it's your spouse, if it's coaching high intensity training, or an employee.
Yeah, great advice. I was almost expecting you to line up a shit sandwich then, and to then say, oh, and this was the negative thing I had to say. But obviously that was just great from you in terms of taking a moment to send something very constructive and positive, and reinforcing those positive habits in Kelsey. So yeah. So we think that positive feedback is the key, and we think it in our coaching of clients, and we definitely think it's key in coaching all of our trainers. We are constantly saying, who did I give feedback to today? Who do I need to reward and recognize? And I always want to reward and recognize with TSP. Okay. Cool. So that was encourage the heart with TSP, truth, specific, positive. The next is the 24-hour rule. What is that exactly?
24-hour rule just refers to you should try to give feedback within 24 hours. So good or bad, try to give it within 24 hours. So with our Kelsey example yesterday, I saw her do that workout at around 11:30. And I gave her that feedback by, at the latest, it was 9 p.m. last night. It was probably earlier than that. I'd have to look back, but it was within 24 hours. And the reason I have to do that is if I give her feedback 4 days later, she might not remember exactly what she did. And so it's not going to resonate with her. And that's if she does something well or if she does something poorly. If she does something poorly and I really need to get on her and give her some really tough negative feedback, some corrective feedback, and I do it 5 days later, she's going to say, I don't even remember exactly what I did or why I did it, etc. So it has to be fresh. Both the positive or the constructive feedback has to be within 24 hours.
Just aside on that, obviously you're going through your busy day when you notice something like that. We've touched on obviously your own kind of system for productivity before, but I'm just curious how you make a note of that. Will you just write that in a journal or make a voice note on your phone, or how do you remember to do that?
So if I'm in meetings, which is generally where I am, I'll always have a notepad in front of me. And if it comes to mind, I'm just going to jot down the notepad, and that notepad is going to be a to-do list. And then I'll be prompted to do it later. And when I actually have time to do it, because I don't want to, jump on my phone or jump on my computer and send that message, but I want to be able to set some time aside later and do it.
Okay. So you'll have some time aside later where you will process your to-do list basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So the next point is public versus private. So what does that mean exactly?
So you want to give positive feedback in a very public setting. You want to give corrective or negative feedback in a private setting. So when you're tearing someone up, it should be private. It should be just you and them. But when you're praising someone, do it in front of the rest of the team. And the reason you want to do that in front of the rest of the team is the rest of the team can learn that, okay, this is the standard for excellence. This is the type of behavior that gets rewarded around here. And then, of course, they can celebrate that person also. If someone, has a big achievement, reaches a milestone, or demonstrates some behavior, because behaviors almost always precede outcomes, we want to reward behaviors. And if we see a behavior that we want to continue to see, we should reward it publicly so the rest of the team says, okay, this is what we should be doing. This is what it should look like. And there's a number of ways you can do public. So we use Slack, which is just internal communication that replaces email. So it's like sending direct messages and group messages all in one place. And so we have a Slack channel called Encourage the Heart. And where the Encourage the Heart comes from, it comes from the book, The Leadership Challenge. And Leadership Challenge is the most evidence-based book written on what leaders do. So leaders in all contexts, in the big companies, small companies, nonprofits, athletics, any type of leadership. There's really 5 things that leaders do when they're at their best. And one of those 5 things is encourage the heart, which is maybe a little bit of a different way of saying we have to reward and recognize people. So when we're encouraging the heart, we will throw it into a Slack. That's what we call the Slack channel, Encourage the Heart. And we'll just point out something amazing that somebody did. Maybe we got great customer feedback, and we'll paste that customer feedback in there. And everyone will comment, or they'll emoji the comment as we really encourage the heart of a particular trainer. So I would say every other day, at least a couple times a week, someone's putting something in the Encourage the Heart channel that they saw a teammate do. And so everyone is getting to see that, hey, that's the level of customer experience, or that's how we want to treat each other, or that's the level of excellence we're looking for on the floor. So Encourage the Heart Slack channel is just one of many ways to do it. Another way to do it is, as I talk to you today, it's Wednesday. This Saturday is our quarterly State of the Company meeting. So it's the one time that everybody in the company comes together. It'll be Saturday afternoon. We'll have everybody in one big training room together. And we will reward and recognize people live. So we'll go through all of our core value vote winners. So everyone votes on which individual performer has lived each one of the core values, and that person will come up front and they'll receive a round of applause. They get a gift card to a department store here, it's a big deal. So we'll do all of our rewarding and recognizing live at that meeting in front of everybody. We'll take the top salesperson that quarter, they'll stand up in front of everyone and they'll get rewarded and recognized. And each quarter they get something different. So they either get a trip somewhere, or they get a gift of some kind, or they get taken to dinner. So we're trying to reward and recognize at that meeting. Another example, tomorrow night, we're taking 2 of our new directors. So a director is really the manager of a particular location, where we just named 2 new directors. The leadership team is going to take them out for dinner tomorrow night. So it'll be a nice dinner. Everyone's dressed up. And our sole purpose of that dinner is to reward and recognize them and congratulate them on earning the new position, and congratulating them and getting excited about the journey that they have ahead of them. So there's a number of different ways that we can encourage someone's heart. We just want to try to do it, the positive stuff, in public. And of course, the negative stuff, we want to do it in private. And that's not to say that the negative stuff is not just as important. It absolutely is important. I mean, corrective feedback is wildly important. We just want to do it in a way that's respectful for that person, which is usually behind closed doors.
Yeah, and what people don't realize is Luke is basically covering the entire slide about me having to prompt him, which I really appreciate. So, you mentioned there one of the things, obviously in public versus private, you mentioned how you give praise. I'm just curious, when you do have to provide some kind of constructive criticism privately, how do you do that?
So we believe in being as direct as possible. So in surveys of managers, when they ask a manager, how would you like to receive feedback about your performance that's negative? Would you want it sugar-coated? Would you want to hear 10 things you do well and then hear the negative thing? Or would you just want it really direct? Managers always say, I just want it direct. Just give it to me directly. But then it's fascinating that when they provide the feedback to their direct reports, they're not very good at being direct. They want to sugarcoat it and they want to beat around the bush and they want to provide some positive feedback first. So they're not delivering in a way that they would actually even want to hear it themselves. So we cut right to the chase and sit a person down and say, we might lead with, we need to have a difficult conversation. And I want to communicate to you that I'm really disappointed in X, Y, and Z. And then we talk about what the performance looked like or what the behavior looked like. And I know I've said this once already, but we want to have that tough conversation, not just around outcomes, because the wimpiest boss can hold someone accountable and have a tough conversation around outcome. Like, Lawrence, you didn't hit your sales number, for example. I mean, that's pretty objective. It doesn't take a really strong manager to be able to hold you accountable to that. But what you have to be a strong manager to be able to do is hold someone accountable for behaviors. So this is the behavior I saw. This is how I saw you communicating. This is what I saw you doing on the floor, et cetera.
Okay, great. Awesome. And I'm just curious as well, you use Slack a lot in your organization. You use Slack instead of email internally. Why do you do that? Because in my head, I'm thinking surely Slack can be even more distracting than email, or am I incorrect there? Like, what's the reason for Slack?
I think the beauty of Slack is it's really conducive to phones. So everybody doesn't have to be on their computer all the time. And our trainers are not constantly on the computer, but they, sit down in the office between their stretch of clients, and it's easy to scroll through their phone and look at the Slacks that they have. So that's one. And then two, just the different groups that you can have. So if I want to communicate just to my leadership team, I can send out a quick Slack to them, like I did last night at about 9:45, a quick message for something they needed to know about today, and they'll see it in the morning when they wake up, and it's just going to the leadership team. So I don't have to email them or communicate with them individually. We have a Slack channel just for our directors. We have a Slack channel for each location. We have a Slack channel for the whole company, called General, which means if we have a big announcement to make to the whole company, everyone needs to know about it. It's going to go in General. We have a Slack channel called Project Learn. Project Learn goes out every Monday. It's one journal article that gets sent out, and then it's 4 data points or 4 updates on what's going on in the business in terms of numbers. So I think it's just an organizational technique to understand where is this different information live. When I get a Slack coming through from a given channel, how is it relevant to me or meaningful to me? But Lawrence, you are 100% right, and that you almost have to be trained how to manage your Slack. I'm telling you, at our last monthly meeting where we have all of our trainers together, I had to go through kind of a work-life balance presentation. And I personally hate the terminology work-life balance because it's all life. Like when you're working, you're not living anymore. So I'm a person that despises work-life balance. And by the way, they do interviews of people in all different work contexts, and they ask different people in a given company, who do you think in this company has the best work-life balance? Across the board, the people that they pick work on average 8.5 hours more per week than the people that they didn't pick. So there is a very weak correlation between work-life balance and how much we actually work. It's really how we approach our work and how we engage with our work, et cetera. So that was a little bit of a tangent. But what we do with our team last month is just teach them, hey, when you're not at work, you don't have to look at Slack, and you have to develop habits about when you're looking at your Slack. Like turn your notifications off. Our trainers work from 5:30 a.m. until 1:30 p.m., or they work from noon to 8. Well, if you work from 5:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and you're looking at every Slack notification from 1:30 p.m. until 8 o'clock at night, you feel like you work the whole day. So turn your Slack notifications off and develop a discipline that it may be at 5 p.m. you turn on your notifications or you open up your phone and you look at Slack for 15 minutes. That discipline will say, did I get any messages that are really, timely that I need to be aware of for tomorrow or that I need to respond to tonight? A 15-minute discipline. What you don't want to do, and I'm thinking about our 24-year-old trainer and the way they live their life, this is very common. You don't want to be off of work. So it's your day off, it's a weekend, your shift's over, and you're trying to watch a movie on Netflix and relax, or you're going on a walk around the lake and a beautiful summer day, and you're constantly looking at your phone, looking at your Slack. So you're not really engaged in the movie that you're watching, or if you're with your significant other or some friends, but yet you're not truly working. So we always say, don't spend 3 hours watching a movie, looking at your Slack nonstop, where you felt like you worked for 3 hours, but you actually only did 10 hours of productive work. Either be working or be not working. And so they need constant reminders of that because they're drawn to the device. And frankly, it's not a work or Slack issue. It's the distraction of the device, because when they get a message on Instagram, on Facebook, text, they're looking at their phone. So we say that it's work is pulling me in. It's the phone that's pulling me in. And maybe that's semantics, but they need some training and coaching around that. So I agree with your statement that Slack can be all-consuming. You just need to have boundaries of how you're going to deal with it, how you're going to interact with it, when you're going to look at it, and are you going to let it just mentally drain your capacity? Because we've looked at this across the board with our staff. Some of our staff constantly looking at Slack drains their capacity. They feel like they worked a 12-hour day, even though they only worked an 8-hour day. They just constantly looked at Slack beyond that. And so can you mentally turn it off, and can you literally turn it off?
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's so refreshing to hear, a leader like you talking about it in that way, because, as you know, for decades, it's been the antithesis of that. It's, the more Slack usage, the better, Well, it wasn't Slack, as Slack wasn't around then, but, more email usage, the better. It was the perception of busyness equals productivity, which we now know not to be true. So no, I really respect that. And yeah, I think that's great that you're doing that. So the next section is coaching. Do you want to just start off by talking about the quarterly conversation and coaching in general?
Yeah. So when we say coaching, so each one of these words sounds like it's a cliche, or it could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. For me, it's pretty concrete. So coaching means how we're coaching and developing the employee, the personal trainer, or any employee. And so the first thing we do is a quarterly conversation. So this replaces like a formal review process. Every 90 days, you sit down with your direct report. And here's the rules of this meeting. It has to be off-site. It can't be in an office. It can't be in your studio. You spend your whole life in the studio with your direct report. So get outside of the studio or the gym. And so here's some real life examples of maybe where you would do it. For me, I'll usually go to coffee. I'll go to lunch. Okay. Sometimes it's a breakfast. Sometimes it's a long walk. So I just did a quarterly conversation with an employee where we went on a long walk in downtown Minneapolis. to a place where we picked up a great smoothie. So it's my favorite smoothie spot, but we did most of our conversation on the walk. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is the communication has to go both ways. So in the traditional kind of review process, the manager gives the direct report feedback and coaching. Hey, this is what you're doing well. Keep it up. This is what you're struggling with. And here's our performance improvement plan to get you up to speed. And then I kind of pat you on the back and send you on your way. With the quarterly conversation, the conversation is a two-way street. So I'm going to give my direct report. So I'm going to give Hannah feedback on what I think she can improve on, what's going well. And then she's going to give me feedback on what I need to do better. And really, there's three things that we think you should be addressing. And this element here comes from Gino Wickman, but frankly, it's pretty universal. We talk about core values first. So I'm going to talk to every employee and just say, how you live in the core values? Grade yourself on a core value. And we grade saying plus, minus, or plus minus. So a plus means last 90 days, Lawrence, you lived that core value. A minus means you didn't live the core value. A plus minus means, sometimes you were there, sometimes you weren't. So one of our core values is learning. You should be able to point to in the last 90 days the specific behaviors that align with that core value. We can't just say, I believe in learning. And I say, well, hold on. What books did you read? What conferences did you attend? What podcasts did you listen to? What colleague did you go visit? All right. What seminar did you take? So you have to be able to point in the last 90 days to the things that you actually did. And we do that for every core value. Now, we want the trainer to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about it. So Hannah may say, Hannah's not a trainer, but Hannah will give herself a plus, and she'll talk about all the things she did. So one of the things Hannah did for learning in the last quarter is she took Seth Godin's marketing class, online marketing class.
Yeah,
and so she commented on that. Yeah. And then so I'll go through and I'll say, Hannah, I think you're a plus also. Here's all the different things that I saw you do. And then so we go through core values first. And by the way, to cut to the chase, we just go through three things. The first thing is core values. The second thing is key roles, which is really their job. I mean, every employee has 5 key roles. So we talk about what's working in your job and what's not working. Let's talk through it. So if it's a trainer, one of those key roles is world-class workouts. So we'll talk about what we see on the floor from a world-class workout standpoint that can be improved or needs to be adjusted. And then number 3 is we talk about their quarterly objectives. So every one of the company has 1 to 2 rocks is what we call them. And that comes from Stephen Covey or Vern Harnish or Gino Wickman, depending on who actually created it, but they all use that terminology. So a rock is just a quarterly commitment. So everybody has 1 to 2 things. That's the most important thing they need to accomplish that quarter to move the whole company toward its 1-year goal. So we just check in on where you're at in your rocks. So let me tell you, if you talk about values, if you talk about the key roles, your job, and you talk about what's most important over the next 90 days, you've talked about essentially everything. Now, you could go on the periphery of those things, but man, if we have great dialogue around those things, we are really being comprehensive in the conversation. So that quarterly conversation fundamentally is designed to strengthen the relationship between the manager and the direct report, because the natural tendency is to move toward entropy, to move toward a frayed relationship. Every 90 days, you will start to fray, and the manager needs to reach out proactively and strengthen that relationship. So that happens every 90 days. Ideally, it's done in the middle of the quarter, not at the end of the quarter. At the end of the quarter would kind of be an autopsy rather than a conversation where we can actually change performance and hopefully change outcomes by the end of that particular quarter.
Great stuff. And the next point is strike. This is a system by which you use to measure faults. Well, faults may be the wrong word, or mistakes from your team. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's we say equal part punitive, equal part coaching opportunity. So you do something bad, you're going to get a strike. And we say, okay, you get a strike for being late for your shift. You were 5 minutes late for your shift. You're going to get a strike. It's important that you're on time. Now that you have the strike, you have 30 days to change that behavior. So over the next 30 days, if you are always on time and you improve that performance, that strike will go away. If you do not improve, that strike's going to stay in your record. And of course, it's 3 strikes and you're out. So the third strike would be termination. Now, this is incredibly important because as a manager, if you ever terminate an employee, It should never be a surprise. They should never be caught off guard. They should know that it's coming. So good management is people know where they're at. They know I'm about to get terminated. So if someone has 2 strikes, they should see the writing on the wall that, oh my goodness, things are not good. I got to change my performance, change my behavior, or I'm going to be looking for a new job. And so you get 1 strike, you get a 2nd strike. They should know that 3rd strike is coming. So, but I really want to make sure that we frame strikes up as a coaching opportunity also. Hey, you're getting a strike because you were late. Now you have the chance to go all in the next 30 days on being on time. Be 15 minutes early every day for 30 days. You've totally changed your performance. And we teach all of our staff that, hey, one of our core values is creating our own future. So creating our own future means if you get a strike, you got to get excited and say, thank you so much for giving me that feedback. I now have the opportunity to get better over the next 30 days. And culturally, that's what we're trying to achieve. A lot of cultures, you get a strike or you get in trouble from your boss. And what do, Lawrence? You leave work and you go to happy hour, you talk to your significant other, and you complain and you bitch about your boss, or it's not fair, or they didn't understand. Instead of just saying, thank you for this opportunity to get better, now watch me go to work on myself and actually turn this around and make this weakness my strength. And frankly, most of these things are not true weaknesses that are embedded in someone's DNA. It's just, hey, you didn't perform up to the level that we need you to perform at.
Excellent. And the last point is shadow. What does that mean exactly?
So we think one of the best ways to coach a trainer is to shadow their workouts. So it's a key management tool is that we're just going to schedule time where we're on the floor, standing in the corner of the room with a clipboard and a document that we fill out, and we're shadowing the session and writing down everything that we see so that we can meet with that trainer later and give them feedback. So we do it one of 2 ways. One is I'm going to shadow your workout, or maybe 3-4 of your workouts, jot down all the notes, and then sit down with you and say, here's what I saw. Here's what I think you can coach better. Here's how I think you can do it differently. Here's what I would have done in this scenario. The other thing you can do is shadow and then just collect all of the data. And then once per month, we do what's called a Get Better meeting. So a Get Better meeting relates only to what's going on the floor. So I look at all my trainers, all the shadowing I've done, and I've said, oh, I've seen this theme. People are not coaching this exercise correctly or the way we want to. So at the Get Better meeting, I will go deep into talking about that particular exercise or that element of form or whatever it is. So that shadowing gives us information to bring to our Get Better meeting to coach everybody on, or we can just sit down with that individual trainer and have a one-on-one with them and say, here's what I saw and here's what you need to improve. So it's tough to improve a trainer's performance unless you actually watch them train. And so, I've shadowed just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of training over time. And now this is what our managers do, is shadow other trainers and give them feedback on their performance.
Awesome. And I'll just take this moment to say, a lot of the format around one-to-ones, quarterly conversations, the different types of meetings, and processes that Discover Strength run that are geared towards getting the most out of their team are all documented, or most of them probably at this point, documented in the HIT Business membership. So actual blueprints that you can use if you're interested in the details of, or more of the details, even though Luke was quite detailed then, of what we've spoken about. And just go to highintensitybusiness.com/membership to learn more about that. Luke, the next slide is develop, where you talk about the core growth plan for your team. So do you want to just elaborate on that?
Yeah, so fundamentally, we think that every trainer, every employee needs to understand the journey that they're going to go on. So when we say develop, we just mean, how is this person going to develop and change and transform over time? So we would argue that you should create we call it a core growth plan. You should create some process that someone's going to go through, and you should create or architect the journey that trainer will go on. So let's specifically talk about trainers. So you can break this up into any system, any process that you want. For us, we start off with the school of PT, the school of personal training, and that's when you're hired, you'll start with that. When you graduate from that, you move to 4 different tiers. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, and then eventually you become a partner. And there's different compensations at each tier, but to move through the tier, you need to fulfill certain requirements. So to become a Tier 1 trainer, You just need to pass out of what we call PT Masters. So it's a test that you take with your director. Then you move on. So every trainer, after they go through their onboarding, becomes a tier 1 trainer. Well, in order to become a tier 2 trainer, you have to complete a certification. So you have to complete the ACSM Certified Exercise Physiologist certification. You have to complete our internal process called the School of PT PhD program. Then you have to do a 1-hour presentation to the training staff on some topic of your choice. So we have those presentations coming up this Saturday. So we have one person giving a topic on a specific element of strength training in pregnancy. We recently had someone do a presentation on rhabdo. We had someone else do a research review on creatine and muscle strength and hypertrophy. So those are examples of the topics. Then they have to do a HIT uni certification. They have to complete the tier 2 reading. I promise I won't continue to go into this much detail, but for tier 2, it's they have to read Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard, a great customer service book. They read Tribes by Seth Godin, because really when it comes down to it, high intensity training, the community is really a tribe. Like Lawrence, you've created a tribe. And so they're a part of that tribe, but Discover Strength is a tribe also, and they're a part of that tribe. And what's it mean to be a part of a tribe? Then they read Body by Science Q&A book. They actually start with that instead of Body by Science. And the reason we have them start with the Q&A book is I think it's so geared toward trainers and so geared toward what's actually going on the floor. And I actually think that so much of Body by Science is is exercise physiology. So they know the exercise physiology because they just came out of a degree program with that, but they don't know the nuances of how to deal with an exercise-induced headache, maybe. And then they read Congruent Exercise by Bill DeSimone. And there's an exam that they take with each one of those books. And then they need a minimum of 1 year of personal training at DS. So that's makes you eligible for tier 2. And then there's different compensation levels that you'll make at tier 2. And then you would move from tier 2 to tier 3, and there's just more things you have to do. So it would take you 5 years to become a tier 4 trainer. It would take you 10 years to become a partner. But here's the key. It's not just that they're making more money at each step. They are really continuing to grow as a professional. There's an immense sense of satisfaction as you receive another certification and you read 4 more books and you get recognized by your teammates for becoming a tier 3 personal trainer. And so we want to make sure that someone's growing and developing. So that is the tier system. And it comes from the idea that the first day that you're a personal trainer, just like the first day that you're a 3rd grade teacher, in the US, you realize, well, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. As long as I stay in this field, this is what I'm going to be doing every day. And I think that you have to create, I think the company has to create a little bit of the journey that you'll go on to make sure that you develop and grow as a professional. And you're not just repeating that same 1 year of experience for the next 40 years. You want to make sure that you're actually evolving.
I absolutely love this. And for everyone listening, you have to, if you prefer to listen and learn, that's fine. I get that. But just for this component alone, it's really important that you go to the slideshow, which will be linked up in the show notes, where you can actually see the Discover Strength compensation plan, and you can see what's required at each tier and how each of the trainers are rewarded. I just think it's amazing. I love how you it's almost like it's gamified, Luke. Like, I don't know if I were, born in in the US or in Minneapolis. If you'd have had me, I'd have jumped at a chance to be a trainer for DS, because this is the kind of thing that absolutely motivates the hell out of me. Like the fact that I can almost look at it like a checklist, and set goals accordingly, knowing that if I do all these things, I will be able to develop into this role and earn this much more money. It just, for me, it would be so motivational, and not enough organizations do this kind of thing. So yeah, it's wonderful what you guys have created there, I think.
And the fun of it for the leader or the manager is you're only limited by your own creativity. So like the books that I choose, the books that I think are relevant. I mean, like I'm looking at our tier 4 right now. The books that you'd read are Nautilus Bulletin 1, Nautilus Bulletin 2, the Nautilus Bodybuilding book by Elle Darden, a book called The Sport Gene by David Epstein, which is an awesome book, and then Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And the reason you wait until like tier 4 to read that book is that is a deep book. That's not the kind of book that you should rush through, when you just get started with a job. I mean, you have to read that book and reflect on it. And you could probably reread that book every 5 years and it would have a different impact on you. And some would actually argue the same about Nautilus Bulletin 1 and Nautilus Bulletin 2. I was recently talking to Jim Flanagan, and he said that he sat down and just reread all of Nautilus Bulletin 1 and Bulletin 2, and he still picked something up, or something hit him differently, or impacted him, or got him thinking differently about some of the content. So one of the things that we do to become tier 4, and this used to be a part of our tier 3, we moved it to tier 4, is that you have to do we call it a traveling clinical rotation at an approved facility. So every one of our trainers leaves for a week and goes and either works at or just spends a week with somebody else in our field. So we've had people go visit Blair in Canada, Mike Petrella in Canada, Roger Schwab in Philadelphia, Dwayne Wimmer in Philadelphia, Patty and Dave Durrell, Diana Del Garbino. We've had people go over to the UK and spend a week with James Fisher. We've had people, go all over the country, hard pressed in Chicago, to gyms and studios and facilities all over the country just to spend a week and learn from that business. And so if the business will allow our trainer to train clients, then that's what we'll do. So we've had multiple trainers go with Dwayne Wimmer and train clients and had great experience. And sometimes the business prefers that we just kind of spend our time shadowing. But man, it's an awesome opportunity for us to learn from other practitioners. And Lawrence, frankly, that's my own bias. That's how I've learned, is I've always wanted to go visit people and learn how they're doing things on the floor and watch workouts and get trained and all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. It's funny. I was having conversations with some of your trainers at Rec 2019, and, some of them seemed quite, we made some assumptions that maybe I earn really well as a podcaster / online business person. And, I made sure I made the point of saying, I think some of you probably earn quite a bit more than I do as personal trainers. And, personal training it has that kind of reputation of not being a very well paid profession. And I just, I guess, take my hat off to you for really looking after the personal trainer and rewarding them and making them the center of your business. I think it's great. And I think it's hopefully going to inspire lots of other, high intensity training business owners to do the same thing. So cool. Okay. So the next section, I think we've probably covered that one quite well. And again, check out the slides, guys, for more depth and detail on what Luke and I are talking about, because it's really important. So the next one is align and 6 questions. Do you want to just go through that for a moment?
Yeah, and I'm going to make this as concise as possible just so that I don't totally derail us. But, the whole concept of our conversation here, the focus is each one of these elements matters to really attract and retain great people and great trainers. And align means that you have to align your employees with the larger vision of the company. So we would say that vision alignment is one of the last untapped competitive advantages in all business. And to achieve vision alignment, you simply need to have everyone in the organization having the exact same answer to 6 fundamental questions. It is literally that simple. There's not a 7th, there's not an 8th. It is 6 questions. And if everyone has the same answer to these 6 questions, I'm convinced you outperform any competition in any market at any time. So this is the sustainable, untapped competitive advantage. And organizations of all size struggle with this. So now let me just be clear. Most companies would say, we are aligned. We are rowing the same direction. Then I say, okay, great. Give me 5 of your employees. Put them in 5 different rooms. Let me ask them these 6 questions. If you have different answers, you're not aligned. And in all cases, they'll have wildly different answers. So leaders and managers are always shocked to find out that, oh, yeah, we have answers to those questions, but they're wildly different. So the 6 questions are, number 1, what are your core values? Number 2, what is your core purpose? So why does the company exist? Why was it created? And then the second, there's an offshoot to that. What's your strategic niche? So what's the sandbox that you're playing in? Where do you want to make all of your money? So let me give you an example there. Our core purpose, the reason we exist, is to lead the movement in evidence-based exercise. That's not a goal. That's just our purpose. It's our passion. It's our cause. It's, I knew from the time I was 20 years old that I wanted to spend the rest of my working life in effort toward fulfilling that purpose. So lead the movement in evidence-based exercise. Well, our strategic niche is just where we want to make all of our money. Our strategic niche is personalized strength training. So we're not going to touch anything that comes outside of that strategic niche. We're not going to talk about nutrition. We're not going to do any cardio. We're not going to do any marathon training prep. I just think about marathon training because I'm a marathon runner, and it's something that we could do, but we're not going to do it. So we say no to everything else. We're not going to do a massage. We're not going to do anything else. So that's the strategic niche. So that's really the second question. The third question is, what's our BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal? So it's just the longest term goal of the organization. Which direction are we going in long term? And it's just amazing how many organizations do not have an answer to this. And I, as an employee, cannot work with you if I don't know where we're going. You have to tell me what's the cathedral we're building. I'll be a bricklayer for you, and I'll lay bricks all day long. But you got to tell me at the end of the day, am I just laying bricks, or am I building a cathedral? And so the leader has to state that. And by the way, that BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal, is not about the owner. It's a goal that's bigger than the owner. So don't you dare say, I want to run this business profitably for 20 years and then sell it and make X number of dollars. No, that's for you. No one's excited about that. You got to talk about like, what are we trying to accomplish as a team? So that's the third question. Fourth question is, what's our 3-year goal? So where are we going to be at in terms of revenue and locations and so forth 3 years from now? Fourth question. I think we're on the fourth question now. Fourth question is, what's our 1-year goal? I think that's our fifth question. Then our sixth question. Yeah. Then our sixth question is, what makes us different? So that's the foundation of our marketing. We have to understand what actually makes us unique, because we can't create any marketing messaging unless we know what are the 3 things that actually make us different on paper. So, hey, when you can answer those 6 questions and everybody in the company knows exactly what the answers are, you now have vision alignment. And those answers can change over time, but they can't change in your head where you don't announce it to anybody. I mean, you may change your big, hairy, audacious goal, and my goodness, you should change your big, hairy, audacious goal. My first ever big, hairy, audacious goal, a company opened in 2006. I wrote this big, hairy, audacious goal in 2005. I said, we'll have 500 sessions, 500 personal training sessions at our one location. And we achieved that BHAG, a few years later. And I said, okay, now we need a new BHAG. And so every, 5 to 10 years, you'll update the BHAG. And some of these other things, you may say, hey, we're in the wrong strategic niche. Our strategic niche shouldn't be personalized strength training. It should just be, I'm making this up, it should just be efficient exercise. So anything that's efficient you would do. So it could be a Carol bike, it could be strength training, it could be, who knows? It's just anything that's 20 minutes, we're going to do it. So that could change and evolve over time. For us, it's never changed. The strategic niche has always been the same. So if you can answer those 6 questions and get everyone answering and on the same page on those 6 questions, there's just no stopping you. And my goodness, your listeners will probably think that's too simple. And I'm telling you, companies of all sizes can't figure it out, and they suffer. And I was just talking to one of our employees' good friends, ran their first marathon this weekend, and I ran the marathon this weekend. And this person works for a big company, and this person has been at the company for a year and is just floating, has no idea what their role in this whole vision is, and they don't understand what the vision is. They don't understand the cathedral they're building. And I think we owe that to an employee. And I think that's, if you want to use this term, that's what the millennial is craving. The millennial, I think all humans crave, like, I want to know what I'm a part of. What are we moving toward?
Yeah, completely. And I think, listeners might be hearing some of those questions and thinking, oh, I'd love to learn more about that. And, I'm talking about things like, your uniques, your strategic niche, the way you position, discover strength. And Luke and I have covered that at length in other podcasts. So again, be sure to go to the show notes for this, highintensitybusiness.com/golden-2, as in part 2. And you'll see links to those other episodes addressing exactly those topics. Luke, the last bit here is engage. So do you want to go through that?
Yeah, so we hear so much about employee engagement, and we look at Gallup research on, hey, a huge percentage of the working world is actually disengaged, or they're not highly engaged. They might be, barely engaged. They might be actively disengaged, or they're actually sabotaging the company. And so what do we want? We want improved employee engagement. Well, what's the definition of engagement? I would say My definition is employees choosing to provide their discretionary effort. So it's an increase in discretionary effort is really what engagement is. And so that's what we want is we want an engaged workforce. And there's probably really three things that create engagement. And this applies to personal training, but it applies to really any work context. The first one is we need measurability. So we want to overcome an environment of immeasurability, meaning everybody needs a number, and that number has to indicate whether or not they're having a good day. Here's what you can't have, Lawrence. You can't wait for your boss or for your supervisor to subjectively tell you how you're doing. You need an objective measure that you can look at every day or every week that says, I'm doing well today. And so that's the idea of a salesperson having a quota. This is why salespeople have such high engagement is they can look at a number. They don't need their boss to tell them, Lawrence, you're doing a good job. They can look at the number and know I'm doing a good job. And so we need some type of measurable. That's number one. Number two, we have to overcome anonymity, meaning we have to be known by the people that we work with. And specifically, we have to be known by our manager. So my direct report, I need to know them as a human being. Okay, it doesn't matter. They will not do great work for me unless they understand that I care about them as a human being. So I have to know their spouse's name, their dog's name. I have to know what's important to them. I have to know what are their passions beyond work. So they cannot be anonymous to me outside of work. So overcoming anonymity. You don't have to do that with everybody in your company. I mean, we have a decent amount of employees here, and I don't have to know every single employee, but I have to know all the employees that report to me. And all of our managers have to overcome anonymity with their direct reports. We have to know them as a human being. So if my direct report is going to run a marathon, I am going to be at that marathon supporting them and watching them because that is the most important thing in that person's probably calendar year. I will be there. I have to understand, is this person about to have a baby? Is this person getting married? What is this person going through? And make sure that person's not anonymous to me as a human being. And then the last one is we have to overcome the feeling of irrelevance. So this is the idea that you come to work every day and you do great work, but you don't know who's actually being impacted by your work. Now, in our context, it's pretty easy. So who is your work relevant to as a trainer? Well, it's obvious. It's the client. The client's being impacted. So we can make that simple connection. All of our trainers, hey, you come into work every day? We have to do this as a manager. You come into work every day? You are changing people's lives with this workout. Okay, that's powerful. But what about our front desk people? Who are they impacting? Who is their work relevant to? Is it our client? It probably is. But is it our trainer? Because our front desk staff, our concierge staff really serves our trainers. What about Heather, my executive assistant? She never interacts with the client. So who is her work relevant to? When she comes to work every day and does great work, who is she actually serving? And the answer there is she's actually serving me. And so I have to do her the honor of telling her that by you doing your work, this is how you impact me. So in a nutshell, we need a measurable. We can't be anonymous to our direct manager, and we have to have a direct link between the work that we do and who it impacts. And if we overcome each one of those things, immeasurability, anonymity, and irrelevance, we will have highly engaged workforce. And that's not a one-time act. It's not like we check the box and we're done. This is just a constant state of what a manager has to do. And if you say, well, I don't have time to do those things, then you shouldn't be managing people. You should be an individual performer. And there's nothing wrong with being an individual performer.
That was gold. And I just think this whole podcast has been just full of excellent wisdom and guidance on how to really look after your team and make sure that they perform really well and that the business works as a really nice, coherent whole. The last point I had here is there's a final slide with Jim Collins' handsome face. And I just wrote Jim Collins ? Because I cannot remember what you said about this slide. I don't know if you recall what that represented for you in the moment.
Yeah. So the reason I had that up there is Jim Collins popularized a principle that he called first who, then what. And so one of his major discoveries in all the Good to Great and Built to Last research was it wasn't as important what you did. Your strategy was never as important as who you had in your team. So he said the successful businesses that outperformed their competitive set, the rest of their industry, had a disproportionate focus on who rather than what. And a lot of smart people read these books, read Collins' work, and said, yeah, okay, this is awesome. The people we have matters. This is great. And Collins, after he wrote the book, said, no, you didn't get it. That's not what I was saying. I wasn't saying that people are important, because that's not groundbreaking. We've always known that. What I'm saying is that my research reveals that companies who actually place more of an emphasis on who than what perform better over the long haul. And this is at every stage of the company's journey. When the company is founded, who you go to work with is more important than the work that you're actually doing. What industry you want to get in, you got to have the right people. Hey, you're confronting a tough economic climate, and there's disruption in your industry, which, by the way, that's going on in our own industry right now. Who you have in your team is more important than the strategic decisions you actually make. And one of the things we would use is let the who figure out the what. You got to constantly focus on, do we have the right people on the bus? And so first who, then what is really how I think you build a great company. And I heard someone at Disney say this, and I wish I knew the name because it'd be more powerful, but I think it was at the time the chief operating officer at Disney said, if you don't have great people, you won't build a great company. It will be impossible to build a great company. And if you relentlessly focus on having great people, then you will inevitably build something great. And so I think that our obsession has to just be on, building a team of great trainers and great people.
Yeah, awesome. You held out a hint there at something which I have to follow up on. You mentioned how the industry is being disrupted. How do you mean at this time?
Well, I just think that 10 years ago, everybody worked out at a place called the health club. Okay. And what did the health club have? The health club had everything. You could hop on treadmills and run. You could do a spin class. You could do a Pilates class, a yoga class. You could lift weights. You could hire a personal trainer. You could go swimming. And that's what the modern health club contained. And health club operators around the world thought, we got this down. We're kicking ass. We know what we're doing. And then along comes CrossFit. And CrossFit said, here's the deal. We're going to build our gyms, our studios cheaper than you. And we're going to charge literally 5 times more per month, and people will flock to us. And guess what happened? People flock to CrossFit. And then we see the advent of things like Orange Theory Fitness. We see segmentation and specialization, where we see the advent of yoga-only studios, Pilates studios, bar studios, studios that focus on just spin, studios that focus only on boot camp. We see the high-intensity training studio that emerged that's just strength training. Okay, we see the proliferation of that. But now we see things like Peloton, where people say, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to buy a Peloton and put it in my home, and I'm going to stream my exercise. So there's just constant disruption in how the consumer is interacting with exercise. And I think that can make any operator concerned about, well, where do we fit in to this landscape? Now, I think the comforting thought for the high-intensity training practitioner is, well, first of all, nothing's changing about human physiology. We need to do resistance training. We need to do resistance training with a high level of effort. And we've also seen resistance training, or high-intensity resistance training, be really viable in the marketplace for 20, 25 years. And I know I just listened to the podcast with Steve Ritz. Steve Ritz was doing one-on-one personal training for, in 1998 and 1999. I started working for him in 1999, and there's been so much disruption at that time. Curves in the US and really worldwide was just starting to take off. And I thought, man, Curves is going to take over the world. And now in the US, you can't even find a Curves that's still open. So there's been so much change and so much disruption. But the thing that remains consistent is the high intensity training model works, which I think is fascinating, because there's a lot of naysayers out there that think that there's something actually wrong with the model and it maybe doesn't have longevity. And we've seen just the opposite. Maybe we haven't seen scale to the level that we have seen in other models, but we've definitely seen longevity from a lot of different operators. And, when I talk about this, I think about Steve Ritz and Adam Zickerman, and I think about, Fred Hahn, people that have been doing this for 20, 25 years. And I know I left out a lot of people there, but there's a lot of people who have been doing this for a long time.
But you are also seeing scale in yourself in Discover Strength now. You're seeing it in the Perfect Workout. You're seeing it with Fit 20, Keys of Training. I know these are various kind of flavors, if you will, of high intensity training. They all do things slightly differently, but the kind of tenets are very similar. And Fit 20 now have at this stage over 120, if my memory serves me right, studios. Keys is even more than that. So I think I also don't understand that argument because, I think there's examples of both longevity and scale. But then, as we know, the one of the where that argument also comes in is this point around, well, maybe they're not delivering the stimulus as properly as it should be delivered, which is up for debate.
So say that again. You think the companies the statement is the companies that have scale have not delivered the stimulus correctly? Well,
some of the debate, I guess, that we see on social media is around these organizations not delivering the stimulus that some people in the HIIT community think they should be in order to call themselves high intensity training businesses.
Yeah. Or could it be the opposite? Could it be the opposite, that they've scaled because they're providing the stimulus better than everybody else, and nobody wants to admit? I mean, as far as I know, usually you scale a business because you got a really good product or service. I don't know too many companies that have built something that's very mediocre. I mean, the iPhone is a pretty darn good phone, and it's scaled. And that's true with, most of the restaurant concepts that I think of. And I'm not saying the nutritional value of every one of those restaurant concepts is perfect, but I'm saying what they're delivering, which in our case is a high intensity training stimulus, they've done it better. They've done it so incredibly well. So I would say, could it be the opposite in some of those scenarios? And I'm not here to debate that, but I am here to say that we are in the perfect storm. We have a perfect combination of or confluence of factors that make the current conditions ripe for the expansion of high intensity training. I mean, you cannot look at any media outlet and not see the increase in awareness of the value of strength training. My goodness, I'm so happy I didn't decide to open up yoga studios 13 years ago, because there's not just study after study after study coming out in the New York Times saying, or covered by the New York Times saying, hey, it turns out strength training is good for you. I mean, we just never would have guessed 15 years ago, and I got into this 19, 20 years ago, I never would have guessed strength training would be valuable for cardiovascular function and cognitive health and, preventing anxiety, depression. Like, I never would have assumed any of those things. The only thing we thought about back then was bone mineral density and bigger biceps. That was it. So the news, it just continually gets better. So my goodness, we're in ripe conditions to grow high intensity training. You combine that with the fact that the consumer has less time than they've ever had. I just think that, I have entrepreneurs talk to me all the time that say, this is a gold mine. The conditions are so ripe. And I agree. So I'm just so utterly confused and it doesn't happen often, when I come across someone that thinks somehow there's an issue with the model.
Yeah, I just had lunch today. Oh, by the way, Luke, if you need me to wrap up soon, just let me know, because I've got another question for you. But I just had lunch, 2 hours ago with someone very senior at Medtronic, which are a big med tech organization. I think they're an American company, but they've got offices in Galway. And we were having a carnivore lunch in McDonald's, and I consumed about 12 burger patties. And he's so he was exactly saying what you just said, which is that I don't have time for all of this stuff. I need I gravitate towards a carnivore or low carb diet to high intensity strength training because it efficiently delivers what I want in terms of results from my diet and training, and so I see that as well, just in terms of the listenership of this podcast, for the non-business owner, but just the people that consume information about health and fitness in this sort of space. Luke, I'm just really curious. One final question for you, and then we'll wrap up. You've got, obviously, ARX are doing quite well in terms of growing their business and delivering more ARX units to individuals around the world and to businesses. And I hear on the grapevine there are other companies developing similar machines to ARX, but potentially lower end in terms of cheaper price point, which might, deliver a percentage of the benefits that ARX does. And I believe that they're going to be targeting more, more individuals, more residential demographics. So actually getting these machines in people's homes because they'll be more affordable. We're talking around $5,000-$10,000, and one machine should be able to cover, all of your bases. What are your thoughts about that? Do you find that to be threatening to, your business and the high intensity training business market?
Yeah. My first answer is yes, but I also think that what we're selling is interactions with an expert, and we're selling coaching. And I frankly, so I'm aware of the evidence. The evidence, if there's one element that emerges from the scientific research around strength training, is that if you strength train with supervision, you'll produce better results than if you don't. It's the one area that I'm just shocked that nobody talks about. And I'm not just talking about high intensity strength training. I don't care what you're doing. Any type of strength training will improve with supervision, has a statistical significant impact on 40-yard dash, vertical jump, 1 repetition max, barbell bench, all the precursors of type 2 diabetes, regardless of what it is. I mean, this was my master's thesis. This was the single component that continued to emerge from all the research, and I couldn't believe it. And so I believe in coaching for what we're doing, but I believe coaching in anything. I think that we do better with coaching. I mean, I use an American football example. Tom Brady is the best quarterback to maybe ever play in the NFL, but the Patriots still have a quarterback coach. So he still needs a coach. I just think we need coaching. And, I run Discover Strength, but I still work with an executive coach who I meet with once a month in a one-on-one for an hour and a half. And so I still can be pushed and can be learned and be challenged. I just think in life we do better with coaching. And I think that applies, to exercise as well. And so I don't know how you're ever going to replace that. And by the way, your listenership right now could think Luke has an incredible bias because his whole business is built around it. But I just think that coaching matters. I think there's a fundamental need that, it goes back to, I learned this first from Ken Manny, who's the legendary strength coach for Michigan State University and really truly one of the first proponents of high intensity training. And Ken spoke at so many conferences and I think is largely responsible for putting high intensity training on the map in the athletic world. He, on all of their shirts and on the walls of their beautiful weight room, he cites the Bible verse, iron sharpens iron, just as iron sharpens iron, one man must sharpen another. And I think that's maybe the foundation of our whole business model is we just need to sharpen another human being. And so I have a very biased approach there because our whole business revolves around it. But I think that we need another human to push us and get the most out of us.
Yeah, no, I think you make some good points there. And second what you're saying there regarding we all need coaches. I invested in a business coach a year ago and it's been the best investment I've made in my entire life. And it continues to be a great relationship and, something that I'm really pleased I did. Luke, this has been so much fun as always. And what's the best way for people to find out more about you and Discover Strength?
Probably 3 things. They can go to our website, discoverstrength.com, and they can always shoot me an email, luke@discoverstrength.com. I always welcome that. And then I guess the other 2 vehicles are they can attend the Resistance Exercise Conference, which is in March. It's in Minneapolis. It's a gathering of exercise practitioners, strength training practitioners from around the world. It is 60% sitting in sessions and learning from other practitioners and speakers and authors, and it's 40% just interacting with each other. It's really become a gathering place of like-minded professionals. So that's the REC, Resistance Exercise Conference. And then lastly, the Real Hit Experience is just a 2-day workshop that takes the personal trainer and takes them on a transformational journey from personal trainer to skilled business operator. So if you're running a personal training business and you want to move toward becoming a skilled business operator, that's a 2-day journey that focuses on that. And we do that 3 times per year, Jim Flanagan and myself in Orlando. So you can link to that website as well.
Excellent. Good stuff. Yeah, those links will all be in the show notes. And to find the show notes for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com/golden-2. So that's for part 2. You can find the part 1 for this over at highintensitybusiness.com/golden. And for all episodes, please go to highintensitybusiness.com/podcast. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Discover how to achieve your health and fitness goals, become a great personal trainer, and build a successful high-intensity training business. Check out highintensitybusiness.com. highintensitybusiness.com.